The faster your car gets, the harder it's gonna be to hook. I mean, that makes sense. We all understand that. So with that being said, you have a couple different options when it comes to a Fox body, or any car for that matter, to get it to hook. But today, we're gonna be talking about putting a spool in your car, whether it be a mini spool, a full spool, or welding the spider gears, whatever the case may be, basically a locked diff. That's what we're gonna be talking about today. I've had a few questions. People ask, how does a car drive? How does it handle? Today, that's what we're gonna talk about. Before we get started though, because it's sitting right here, big shout out to STL Mikey. Guys, if you wanna sound like this, and let me tell you, you do wanna sound like this, check this out. Look, it's even got copper screws on the back. If you want it to patina and run down, check this out. Look at the 3D going on right here. That's freaking awesome. If you guys would like a sound like this, check out Art of Ore. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. I'll put all the information up for you right here. So if you guys have been on the channel any length of time, you know we've been consistently and constantly upgrading this car. We went from basically just a stock bottom end car, or well, we thought it was stock bottom end. It was actually 60 over, but stock block, stockish bottom end car. Then we put a cam, then we put heads. It had an AOD in it. Well, we swapped from the AOD to a T5. Then we went turbo. And then from there, we put our 347 Dart block in, a new set of 205 11R heads, Extreme Energy XE274HR camshaft, built C4, 2500 stall, well, about 2800 stall actually. And yeah, we still have the turbo on this thing. So this car is capable of making some pretty decent power. We'll call it realistically 600 to the tires. It's very capable of making that kind of power. With this setup, no problem. But here comes the issue. How do we hook this thing, right? There's a lot of suspension upgrades that you can do. I mean, you got companies like UPR, you got Viking, you got Stiflers, you've got Strange. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Team Z stuff. But that alone, a lot of times, isn't enough to really make a car work at the track. So what are some of the things that you're gonna have to do? So that leads us to the conversation of what do you do to make these cars hook and to make them work? Well, typically to get a car to hook, like a mildly modified car. So let's say you've got a set of heads, cam, basically heads, cam, intake car. So let's say this car is making about 300 to the tires. Typically, just a set of uppers and lowers and a good set of tires. You always got to have good tires, guys. So I'm just going to assume that you've picked whatever kind of drag radial or wrinkle wall or whatever it is that you want. You've already chosen that and it's on the car. You got a couple different options. You can go with upper and lower control arms. They usually kind of help. They tighten things up. I'm not going to get into the whole suspension thing because that's a whole nother video, but just know this. Throwing a set of uppers and lowers on your car typically doesn't do a whole lot for, like, you know, the hooking capabilities, if you will. Where these things really shine is when you get something that changes your geometry, your pinion angle. That's typically where your car is then going to start hooking, rather than just putting a set of uppers and lowers on the car that are the same length. That really doesn't do a whole lot with the bushings and all. Anyway, so I'm not going to dive all into the suspension stuff. So you can do uppers and lowers. You can do a nice set of adjustable shocks. That does help, believe it or not. Then you got your front suspension. So your struts in the front are going to help transfer weight. I'm not going to get into the whole squat or anti-squat thing. That's all irrelevant for this. But that's only going to take you so far. A lot of times what's going to happen with these cars is they like to peg leg, meaning they'll spin one tire. I remember back in the day, you know, everybody used to throw them in reverse and kind of pop the clutch, spin the tires a little bit and lock it in. I don't know how much truth there is to that. This is the reality. The lockers in these cars are bad about going out. And it gets really, really expensive to put an aftermarket locker in one of these cars. Now there are cheaper options, lockers out of other vehicles and things like that. That's always available for you. But we're here to talk about basically the best of the best as far as both wheels always pulling the same. There is no comparison to some type of spool, some type, whether it be a mini spool, whether it be a full spool, or whether it be welded spider gears, whatever the case may be. Now, with that comes a different set of issues, right? Your car is probably going to hook its best that it's ever hooked with that setup, just because both tires are 100% moving at the exact same time, no questions asked. Sounds pretty good, right? Well, the way these rear ends are designed, they actually don't always need to turn at the same time. There's a good video. It's actually it's a GM video. It's a Chevrolet video. As these wheels turn, this wheel over here has to slow down a little bit, and this one has to spin the car around. That's what helps you turn, right? Well, you take that out of the equation when they both spin at the same time, and you put your suspension in a bind, put your drive line in a bind, and pretty much everything else.
When the troop goes around the corner, the riders on the outside of the turn have to adjust their speed to keep even with the riders on the inside. The man on the outside has to ride a lot farther and a lot faster in order to keep up with the parade. The outside wheels must spin faster than the wheels on the inside because they have a greater distance to travel in the same length of time.
If you're wanting to do something like this, here's my thoughts on it. If you got a street car and literally, like I said, a head cam intake type setup, there's really no need at that power level, and unless you're at the track every single day, I wouldn't worry about it. If you're street driving your car, I'm gonna say don't put a spool in it, but I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying I wouldn't do it because wet weather and spools and drag radials just doesn't get along, and skinnies, and like you got to factor in your suspension. Typically a drag race setup is going to be a lot more soft, sometimes a lot more loose, got some body roll to it, versus something like a road race setup that really can handle that type of situation. I'm going to show you some video of where I was driving the car and let you kind of decide for yourself. And you try to turn your wheel like real sharp in a parking lot to move around, you're gonna notice it's gonna be tight to turn and the car is just gonna feel like it's all in a bind. Also, you will eat your tires up. Trust me, you will eat your tires up a lot quicker due to the turning and one tire having a slip and the other one not. And when I mean slip, I mean actually spin. So these things will leave black marks everywhere you go. I can take you guys outside here in just a second to show you what I'm talking about. Also, if you're on regular old street tires, expect these things to chirp and make noise and stuff like that when you turn. So inside the shop, if I go to turn my car any little bit, you can hear the back wheels just chirping. So it's crazy, but that's just the way this stuff works. You can drive these cars in the rain. I'm not telling you that immediately, as soon as you get out there on a wet road, it's just gonna spin you out into a ditch. I'm not saying that, but you have to be very careful in the rain with something like this, because guys, one tire is not gonna give up for the other tire. If one tire gets in a bind or one tire spins, they're both gonna spin.
When a wagon turns a corner, the wheels can travel at different speeds because each one can turn freely on the axles. And in the early automobiles, the rear wheels turned separately and only one wheel was connected to the engine. But when only one wheel was driven by the engine, it had to do all the work, and it couldn't get a good enough grip on the road to do its job properly. So the one-wheel drive was soon out of date. But if two wheels are locked on an axle so that they are not free to turn separately, one or the other has to slide.
There's some really good videos out there that explain it, but it can put you in a hairy situation. Let me ask you guys something else too. We've all had that car that peg legs, that spins one tire fire, whatever you want to call it. We've all had that car. Have you ever hit that thing like while you're turning? It'll just burn one tire all the way around the curve or whatever it is that you're doing. You can stop dead in the road and stomp it and it'll just leave one black mark straight as an arrow, right? We've all been there and done it. Those cars are super fun, by the way. All right, so now let's talk about a car that spins both wheels, right? With positive traction, just positive traction. I'm not talking about a locker. When that car starts spinning both tires, now what does it want to do? It wants to get all over the road and get crazy with you, right? That's always gonna spin two tires. So let's just say you got a stock Mustang. I don't care what it is, whatever, stock. And let's say you kind of pull off to the side of the road, right? And you get one tire off in the grass and you go to take off. A lot of the times, it's just gonna spin the one in the grass. Most of the time. It's gonna allow that other wheel over there that's on the pavement not to spin. That is a limited slip. That's what they're designed to do. They're designed to let one wheel spin freely and the other wheel to not. So now imagine pulling off to the side of the road with a car that's got both wheels that cannot do anything but turn at the same time. There's no option for that. If it doesn't turn at the same time, something's broken. Now you get yourself off beside the road and you hit this. I don't even know what's going to happen. It's going to get crazy. It's going to be a wild ride. It's probably going to spin you in circles, throw you off in the ditch or something. So that's my point. Look, the whole reason I'm doing this video is because I've been asked many times, is it streetable? Yeah and no. I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys to go out and take your spooled car and enjoy it just like it's an everyday car. Be cautious. That's the thing, right? So let's go back over this real quick. Like, when is a spool needed? Well, possibly never for some of you. Some of you will never need a spool, ever, ever, ever. Did I have to have a spool? No. We could have put a really good locker in this car and been just fine. Think of it this way, guys. A spool is mainly for drag racing. That's really it, guys. That's it. If you're not going to be at the track, if you don't ever want to go to the track, do not put a spool in your car. Don't weld your spider gears. Don't put a mini spool in. Don't do any of that. If you want to do street and track, there's some really good lockers out there, guys. You can buy a locker. Yes, they're a little more expensive, but there are options. And I don't know the ins and outs of them because I never got into the whole locker deal. But there's some options out of some other cars and vehicles like that you can grab a locker out of. One of the biggest reasons why people go with spools is when you go to a really big axle. Like, these are 35 spline axles. I mean, they're not actually that big. And stock axles like that, and these are more like that. So those are 35 spline axles in that car, and they're massive. Try finding a locker that's got the 35 splines in it. They're very expensive. So you run into the question of, well, I need enough axles so that I don't break them and so that I don't have to worry about it. But oh my God, now I'm looking at the price of these lockers and I'm like, there's got to be a cheaper alternative. Yeah, a spool. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoy the video. I'm sure I left some things out. I always do. My brain is just all over the place. But with all that being said, I'll catch you in the next video. And as always, thanks for watching.
So engineers had to find a way to connect both rear wheels to the engine without sliding and slipping on turns. The device which makes this possible is a part of the rear axle. It is called the differential because it can drive the rear wheels at different speeds. The differential looks complicated, but once we understand its principle, it is amazingly simple. These two wheels are mounted on separate axles and supported by a frame so that they can revolve freely at different speeds. Let's fasten a spoke on the inner end of each axle so that by turning the spokes, we can turn each wheel separately. With a bar or crosspiece, we can turn both wheels in the same direction at the same rate of speed. Let's get something to hold this bar in place so that it will press against the spokes. Notice that this support is not locked to the axle. It turns freely. Now we can spin the wheels by rotating the support. This is fine as long as both wheels are able to turn at the same speed. But let's see what happens when we go around the corner. With this arrangement, we cannot drive one wheel faster than the other. And if we stop one wheel, the other wheel won't budge. Let's put this bar on a pivot so that it can swing in either direction. Now, the bar can still turn both wheels at the same speed. And because it pivots, it lets one wheel turn even when the other is stopped. But if turned too far, the bar will swing around until it won't drive the spokes that turn either wheel. we need another crossbar and more spokes to carry on the job. When we stop one wheel, the crossbars will continue to push the spokes of the free wheel around. As long as both wheels are free to turn, the bars do not swing on their pivot, and the wheels move at the same speed. Now we have the working principles of a differential. To adapt the model for use in an automobile, we will have to make a few changes. In order to reduce the jerky action caused by wide spaces between the spokes, we will put in more spokes. Further filling in the spaces between the spokes gives steadier, more continuous action, and changing the shape gives firm, constant contact. Now we can make the gears thicker and stronger, and we have differential gears. The edges are cut so that they will fit together more smoothly and silently, and another gear is added to share the work of driving the axles. The principle is the same. In order to turn the support and drive the wheels, we can fasten a large gear here, connected by a smaller gear to a source of power. Notice that the power is connected to the differential at the center line. We can make our model more compact by moving the gears closer together. When we put our differential in an automobile, we have to leave room for the drive shaft, which carries the power from the engine. We may build the floor of the car above the drive shaft. But if we do, we won't have much room inside unless we make the top of the car high too. Of course, we could lower the floor and ceiling, but the drive shaft would be higher than the floor. This would have disadvantages. A shaft in the middle of the floor of an automobile would be inconvenient for passengers and would be awkward for carrying luggage. Today, engineers have found a way to make the car roomier and closer to the road without a clumsy shaft above the floor. The drive shaft from the engine to the differential is lowered out of the way, and the drive shaft is connected to the rear axle at the bottom. The new low center drive makes the rear axle quieter, stronger, and more durable because it gives better, smoother contact between the gears. The automobile of today with the low center drive is stronger and more rugged. Every part of the rear axle has been built to withstand strains far greater than it will ever meet on the straightaway or around the corner.